Welcome to this Killick Explains video, and welcome to a selection of what I'm going to say are financial planning mistakes. In other words, things that can either put people off or derail them once they're somewhere in the process. So these are worth avoiding. So just a reminder, first of all, why do we do financial planning? Well, it's all about setting goals, which is important, working out roughly when we want to achieve certain things in life, what it might cost, making key decisions between alternatives, all right, facing up to what I call the unknowns, if you like. People tend to sort of hide their head in the sand, not want to think about trying to balance short, medium, long-term goals and so on. So we're looking to do a kind of regular progress check on, are we achieving the goals we've set out? And there are, I've got to be honest, several ways the process can come unstuck. All right, so let's go through some of the most common ones. First one I've called paralysis by analysis. Now, essentially, this is the idea that doing something like, say, a cash flow forecast, a cash flow model, where you sort of plot out in the future big life decisions, sabbaticals, school fees, weddings, property extensions, and then try and work out what they might cost, can give an illusion of control. Now, what I mean by an illusion of control is that there are quite a few options you may need to weigh up, and some people find those a bit intimidating. All right, they get lost in the jungle of choice, as I call it. It's called the paradox of choice, and they end up going, this is all too difficult. Now, that's where getting some help can come in handy, because actually building a roadmap, a cash flow model, is quite challenging if you've never done one before. But actually, with a bit of guidance, it can be a fairly straightforward exercise. And it's really important not to be put off by the seemingly endless number of choices you could make, whether it is about where you live, where your kids go to school, okay, how many sabbaticals and holidays you take over your lifetime, when you do house extensions, if and when you try and buy a second property, and all the rest of it. Those can be distilled down. You can put amounts and you can put timings on them. Number two, perfectionism. Now, this is not people who get put off by the paradox of choice. They get stuck in, but essentially they end up with this horribly unwieldy set of calculations on an Excel spreadsheet. They try and put a budget together, and they go down to every minute line of their monthly expenditure. They get lost in the detail, or they try to put a sort of statement of net worth together. All right, what am I worth? Can I track that over time? And they try and list every single teaspoon they own and put a value on it. It all gets too complicated, because essentially what they've forgotten is something Sir David Tweedy used to say about preparing financial statements, which is it's much better to be roughly right than absolutely wrong. So when it comes to building a budget, building a cash flow model, keep it simple, the KISS rule, all right? And bear in mind that you're not necessarily going to get everything in there. You're not necessarily going to get everything right, but you are going to build a useful picture and something you can benchmark your progress against over the future, and it will change, all right? So there's no point in going down to a minute level of detail, because life has a habit of changing. Your commitments change, your expenditure changes, your asset base changes. So roughly right, not absolutely wrong. Then there's inflexibility, as I call it. And that is, some people almost view doing a financial roadmap, building out a cash flow forecast or a cash flow model, as something you finish and then sort of hang on the wall and admire or put into a drawer. But life's not like that. As I mentioned just now, life changes. New information may come to light. The first time you sit down with someone to prepare one of these things, you may not tell them everything you thought was relevant. All right, so you think, should have mentioned this. All right, so you do need to review and revise and revisit, lots of R words, these documents. All right, and don't be too rigid. Things will change. All right, get the roadmap set out, get the cash flow model down, and then be prepared to flex it. It doesn't have to be every 5 minutes, annually for argument's sake, as new information comes to light. Finally, if you're an anxious type, and I'm quite an anxious, stressful type, it can be great. I've got an attention to detail, I make sure things are done correctly, but it can actually derail the planning process, because some people get obsessed by it. All they can think about, having put down a good cash flow model, is what can go wrong. All right, Will I achieve my goals? Will I get to finish work when I thought I would? Will I leave enough money behind for my children? Will I be able to afford that property, that wedding, those school fees? And the whole point of doing this exercise, laying those goals out, putting a timing and a value on them, is it should take away some of the stress. Now, it's really important, and this is where somebody can help you, that you make realistic assumptions, all right, about, for example, the rate of your wages growth, if that's factored into the model, inflation, all right, and those are not easy to make, but they are possible to do. You must get your natural attitude to risk right. You know, are you the kind of person that will panic if the stock market, which underpins your financial plan, drops by 20%? Some people, that won't worry them too much, they'll take a long-term view. Other people will panic sell all the shares they own. There's no right way to be, but you need to be honest about who you are and how you think. So in summary, the golden rules really of financial planning, which does involve getting down and dirty with some numbers, a cash flow model or a roadmap, call it either. Basically, those projections, those forecasts, those conversations are intimidating, but think about keeping it all good enough, roughly right, not absolutely wrong. Stay flexible and adaptable, right? This is a living document, not something that's set in stone. And if in doubt, if you're the kind of anxious person who feels the need to change things, do nothing, all right? In other words, don't worry too much if, having set out your financial plan and your cash flow model, not very much changes. That's fine, all right? You don't always have to be tinkering with these documents and these plans once you're comfortable with the basic contents. Okay, that's it from me on this video. If you'd like to find out more about some of those long-term goals I mentioned, particularly the big one for most of us, which is dialing down or stopping work, then there are some guides, not this light blue one, but there are some guides. There's a kind of purple one and a grey one. Those are available along with other videos if you like to watch things in the style of Killick Explains at killick.com/resources. And I should finish by mentioning our quarterly magazine, Confident, where the planning team often take on some of these issues in more depth.